Ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for being here with us today. I am Linda Haschef, the Executive Director for Opportunity Alliance Nevada, and we really appreciate you joining us today to discuss policy and advocacy related to affordable housing in Nevada. We have another wonderful panel of experts who will be sharing valuable information with us today. Just a few housekeeping items to remember. If all participants could remain muted, and with any questions you might have, please post them in the chat box and we'll keep an eye on them. We will also be participating in a fun polling exercise. So please have your smartphone camera ready in just a few minutes. And we'll explain more about that later too. But before we get started, I'd like to share some information about Opportunity Alliance Nevada, who we are and what we do. We are a statewide organization that brings together resources and people from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. We help investigate and understand the barriers faced by struggling low to moderate income Nevadans, and also to provide pathways to self-sufficiency. We accomplish this through training, financial coaching, mentoring, education and advocacy, partnerships, and collaborations. We collaborate and partner with public, private, and nonprofit organizations in an effort to build the financial wellness of their employees and the clients they serve. We offer trainings such as Bridges Out of Poverty, financial coaching training, and Getting Ahead in a Just Getting By World. We try to investigate, educate, and advocate for policies that provide pathways for all Nevadans to build wealth and economic security. And we know that housing is one of the largest expenditures in a monthly budget. So as we get started with today's discussion, I'd like to highlight some of what I call the financial pain points that people are facing nationwide and in Nevada. Right now, 1 in 6 renters nationwide are not caught up on their monthly rental payments. In Nevada, they estimate over 127,000 people are behind on rent, or about 14%. Just from the people we talk to, I feel like it's a lot more than that. 1 in 3 adults nationwide have difficulty covering their typical or usual household expenses. And in Nevada, they estimate that to be 39%, or 907,000 people. And this information that I'm sharing doesn't include food insecurity, unemployment, or underemployment, which we know exponentially aggravate those situations. So the need for affordable housing is only growing in Nevada. And with that, we'll start with our wonderful panel of experts. Some don't like to be called experts, but they do an amazing job working on housing in Nevada. First, I'm going to introduce you to Christine Hess. She is the Executive Director of the Nevada Housing Coalition, and she will be discussing the basic state of affordable housing in Nevada, including an overview of existing affordable housing and the need for additional housing. She has a statewide nonprofit, which is the coalition, working to advance and promote affordable housing for all Nevadans. She just recently relocated to Nevada in March, and I personally think she's doing an outstanding job coming up to speed and getting us all together and working on this. Previously, her experiences in public-private partnerships, collaborating across sectors, policy and advocacy, and economic development. She and her husband, who is a 4th generation Nevada, have settled in and are happy to be here. So welcome, Christine.
Yeah, thank you so much, and for those generous words. I am definitely not an expert. I'm thrilled to be here learning a lot like you all. Definitely have gotten up to speed, in my economic development and community development background have helped that. And personally, I've had an experience. I was displaced with Hurricane Sandy. So I can very much appreciate when you can't find affordable housing. I was living in New Jersey on the Jersey Shore, not like the TV show. It was the fishing town. And we couldn't find a place to live. The closest place we could find was an hour and a half inland. And we said, well, let's just go back to Wyoming, which is where I was originally from. So, and that displacement I got on my feet pretty quickly, but it was difficult. And definitely life-changing. So I appreciate the time that all of our Nevadans are in now. So thank you so much for this opportunity, Linda. And I am going to lean on you when we get to the technology component. So again, as Linda noted, we are a statewide nonprofit. I have an awesome board of directors that is representative of the state geographically from the north, the south, the rural, the urban areas. It's really been just wonderful. Public-private representation as well. I just get such great guidance as the coalition really works to promote and advance affordable housing in Nevada. As Linda said, before COVID, we were really in crisis mode, if you will, from an affordable housing perspective. If you're out there on the market and in some of the income brackets, you know what I'm talking about. And then now that COVID has hit, it's even more so. So the way that we work through 3 priorities: advocacy, education, and collaboration. And I'm going to give you all an opportunity to participate and collaborate here live. And we're going to start right now. So I am also a little bit crazy. Those of you who have only met me virtually, I'm going to try a new technology, and Linda was so generous to allow me to. So yes, Linda, do you want to give the instructions? You'll do it better than I will, I think.
You bet. Thank you, Christine. So if you guys have your smartphones and you just open up your camera and you hold it pretty close to that scan bar that you'll see on your screen, something will pop up. And if you tap on what pops up, it's going to take you to the location where you can participate in this poll.
So here's what I'll do to incentivize everybody to participate. If you think this technology is cool, you can hit me up after this and I'll show you how to do it. So, but you have to participate to ask me.
So you will just go ahead, and once that the location comes up, you can type in this word and then you hit send.
So I can see we have 14 answers, at least 15. Maybe just another few seconds. Ooh, awesome. Oh, you guys are making this fun for me. All right, I'm going to do a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Wow, so cool. So as we can all see, I think we're all on the same page in terms of what affordable housing means. And Linda, I can send this slide to you if you want to capture it later.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to capture it too. Thanks everybody for playing. So I think essential, right? Necessary, critical, politically sketchy, lots of great words were used on the last slide to describe affordable housing. But right now I want to talk about the technical part, because it does have actually an official definition of what affordable housing is. So affordable housing, housing is defined as affordable when a family pays no more than 30% of their household income on rent. I did put an example in here. I think it helps kind of put things in perspective. If a family's monthly income is $2,000, an affordable payment for rent and utilities would be $600. And I know we're all thinking, where can you find that here? And there's plenty of people who, you know, maybe make $2,000 a month. So we can really start to feel what that means for individuals. If rent and utilities exceeds 30% of the household's income, so if it's not affordable, in the affordable housing world, we actually call this cost burdened. So you're going to hear me use this term here coming up as well. This is really, this point is really important to, in the affordable housing world, for sure, homeownership is important and that's what we're all striving for. But in affordable housing, of course, we're going to talk about housing across a spectrum. And some people might be starting in a rental unit working towards their dream of the American dream, right? All of our dreams is to own a home. So, well, maybe not if you're a millennial now. So Sorry, millennials, if that's not your dream. But anyway, as we continue along, one of the important factors is in Nevada, 44% of our households are renter households. And that is significantly higher than the nation's average. The nation's average for renter households is 36%. So the impacts are pretty tremendous, especially as we consider COVID. This next piece of information, these next couple of graphs are from the National Low Income Housing Coalition. And I know we all know it, but Nevada's numbers are tremendous. And really they are from an availability of affordable housing, we're the worst in the country. And we have some of the highest cost burdens in the country as well. And again, when I talk about cost burden, the blue on the right-hand side of your screen, the blue bar is cost burden. So let me describe this chart better. Each group represents an income. So to the far right, the smaller group is called middle income, and that is 81 to 100% of area median income. And we're going to talk about this in a minute. But for this slide's purpose, it's middle income. And we kind of move down through the different groups: middle, low, very low, and extremely low income. And the blue bar represents cost burdened. So households within extremely low income, for example, that are cost burdened, are actually 93% of the households. The orange bar is severely cost burdened. That means that a household pays more than 50% of their income on housing, which is just not acceptable. What happens is people don't take care of themselves, right? They don't go for healthcare. They just don't invest in themselves when all of their money are going towards housing. Additionally, they're one car breakdown away from not being able to pay rent. And on the left-hand side, you'll just see extremely low-income renters are some of our most vulnerable population.
Christine,
so the income, yep. Oh yeah, sure. And I didn't see the question. Sorry, Linda.
That's okay. I was going to say, is the cost burden, the 30% cost burden that you refer to, is it is it net income or after taxes?
Gosh, I don't know that technical answer the way HUD describes it, Linda.
Yeah.
That's
I think it's this is Eric.
Eric, if you want to jump in, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, it's an adjusted gross income, so it's before taxes.
It's before.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you for the answer, and thank you for the question.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks. So now I just want to actually put the incomes into perspective. So we went from middle income to extremely low income. And I want everybody to think about a low income individual in Nevada so that we can just kind of wrap our heads around what this number is. And if you take your phone and get the QR code again, if it's still open, you can actually participate. I see that we have people chiming in, but I just like to know what your idea of low income is. And I'm using the HUD definition and no fair cheating and looking things up. All right, so I'm going to give it 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So half of this audience, at least that participated in this poll, think that low income is $26,000, and that is actually considered very low income. Low income in Nevada is $42,000. So it's a number that is actually something I think that we can relate to and helps put things into perspective. And I just actually want to go back here to look at that. So here's the low income right here. So making 80% of our area median income. And 26,000 here for very low income, 15 for extremely low income. And so we've talked about kind of what affordable housing is. I also wanted us to put a face on it. So right now we talked about housing insecurity and cost burden as numbers, but who are the people in Nevada who are cost burdened? And I also want us to look at this through a COVID lens. So I chose 4 occupations that have been impacted most. And what you'll see there, I've already classified them based on their median monthly earnings as very low income or low income. You'll see I've calculated their 30% of their monthly income. And in the upper right corner, the average fair market rent in Nevada for a 1-bedroom apartment is $858. And I'm pretty sure those are difficult to find. I can tell you definitely in the Reno and Vegas markets for sure. Perhaps some places out in the rural, but it would be difficult as well. So those are the people who are struggling. And if we think about it from COVID, if there's unemployment and their housing insecurity has just been exacerbated. And the why, well, we've heard a lot of the why, but we just don't have enough. And so I'm really thankful to be part of this panel because this is a number from the National Low Income Housing Coalition, but we are short nearly 80,000 units, affordable and available rental units for extremely low income Nevadans. So we have a lot of work to do, and which is why this panel discussion is so critical and timely. And the Nevada Housing Coalition is definitely working toward this. We are hoping and trying to leading efforts around an equitable housing recovery for Nevada. And what does that look like? We're actually asking you as partners and stakeholders to participate in our upcoming summit and help answer that. In the meantime, we've been collecting data with enterprise community partners and doing a national scan, and also listening to our stakeholders and providing some recommendations, which we'll give in 2 weeks' time here at our upcoming summit. And this is really important. This is where I hope everyone here on this call, on this panel discussion, can join us October 27th to the 29th for the summit. The summit is actually going to have some polling throughout, but it's really targeted at listening. The chat's going to be enabled. We want you to tell us what tools and solutions will work well for your clients. So I hope you can join us. I'll put it in the chat as well, so you can just link there after the meeting or copy the link. And that's all for now. And Linda, sorry I didn't follow the chat if there's any questions.
Thank you, Christine. And I think it was about annual income versus monthly income and then net pay. So if you don't
Can I get those in the chat? Would you like me to address those now?
Sure. That would be great.
Let me pull up the chat. I see Rachel's question. Oh, okay. I think everybody's addressing it in there.
Yeah.
So I think what I'll do is go through the chat. If you have some questions for me, I'll just go through the chat and answer them there.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Christine. Yeah, and I think that was a great presentation. I thought the poll was really fun, but especially how you put some faces on it. What a one-bedroom rental might look like and how unlikely it is that they're available. And then the folks who work in the different industries and what they face trying to find affordable housing. And that there's some portions of our Nevada communities that pay upwards of 50%. I think it's a very telling data point to see what some folks are actually facing. So thank you again, Christine. And we very much look forward to the summit, and we'll make sure we talk about that again at the end of this presentation. So next I'd like to introduce you to Claudia Hanson, and she's going to talk a lot about the implications of policy and advocacy around affordable housing, including her work on Senate Bill 103 and how the city of Reno implemented an active program from that, and how others can follow suit, other communities who should follow suit. But Claudia is a planning manager in the Office of the City Manager for City of Reno. She has a degree in city and regional planning from the School of Architecture at Cal Poly. She began her career with the city in 1994 as a council liaison, speechwriter for Mayor Pete Sferrazza, and over the past 20 years has worked for the city in both advanced and current planning. She was a planner on city projects such as ReTrack, the Aces baseball stadium, and the public safety training facility. She currently manages projects out of the Office of the City Manager, including the upcoming Parks and Rec Master Plan, overseeing historic preservation and administrating some capital improvement projects. So welcome, Claudia, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a great program. And as Christine, that was a wonderful presentation. So I am going to focus mostly on SB 103 today. And Linda, if you could put up my slides, that'd be great.
You bet.
Thanks.
Right here.
Mine aren't quite as beautiful or interactive as Christine's, but they get the point across. Okay, so SB 103 was passed in the 2019 session. And the main purpose of it was to enable cities to subsidize, either in part or in whole, certain fees. So impact fees or enterprise fund fees for affordable housing projects. The city at the city of Reno, what that includes is building permit fees and sewer hookup fees, not your monthly sewer bills, but just the initial hookup fees, which can be a few $1,000s for a single family home or hundreds of thousands of dollars for larger projects. Ultimately, we're looking at also using this for the RIF, so the Regional Road Impact Fee Program, but that is multi-jurisdictional, so we would need to get Washoe County and City of Sparks on board with that as well, and work through the RTC to get it to get the legislature used for the RIF program as well. All right, next slide. Linda, can I get the next slide?
Yes, of course. I'm having a little bit of trouble here.
Thank you. Okay, so when this got adopted, council immediately saw the importance of this initiative, and in November of last year, of 2019, they initiated an amendment to our local code, RMC, Reno Municipal Code, to enact this this bill. So when it went through the legislature process, it set it up so that we had to amend our local ordinance to allow this, which is why we had that extra step in there. They directed staff to to prepare an ordinance and work with stakeholders on the preparation of that ordinance to make sure that we were approaching this appropriately. We had a roundtable discussion also in November of 2019. The city doesn't always work quite that quickly, but so within 10 days, I think we had the roundtable discussion, which is very quick. We were told in no uncertain terms that City Council wanted this to happen and happen quickly. So we did draft the ordinance, and the ordinance was adopted through a couple of public hearings in February of 2020. So very few ordinances. I've been writing ordinances for the city for 20 years. I'm not sure I've ever seen one be initiated in November and adopted in February. So council realized how urgent this was and took appropriate action. Okay, next slide, Linda. So in the state law, it requires that we hold public hearings for every application that comes in under this program. So it isn't just an automatic waiver of fees. Every project that comes in and every affordable housing project that comes in to apply for this has to go through an application process, and which has to be approved by City Council. City Council, whenever the application comes in, has to consider what the request is and what the impact on the funds are going to be. Because in some years, last year, we would have been fine. Everything was rosy and sunshiny, and there probably wouldn't have been an issue on funding. Now we have to look at things a little bit more carefully because funds are definitely much tighter this year, as we all know. So this is ongoing, but depending on what year you apply, City Council has to consider them differently because we have to make sure that we're not impacting the overall fund for sewer or building permits. The state law also required that we establish criteria for the application process. So we had 3 criteria, and these were set through that roundtable discussion. So these were affordable housing developers, and we had a couple planning commissioners on there. So the first criteria was for projects that have an average of 60% AMI, they were eligible for a 75% reduction for just the units that were at or below 60% AMI. So not for the whole project, but just those units, which is encouraging more of those affordable housing units to be built. If they're located near a BRT, which is bus rapid transit, which is the main lines through the bus lines through RTC, they're eligible for an additional 10% reduction, so up to 85% at that point. So they would be able to apply for that up to 85%, and then that would be analyzed by staff and then gone to City Council to make the final decision, considering the overall impact on funds at that time. And again, this is just for building permit fees and for sewer impact fees, or I'm sorry, sewer hookup fees. And then the second criteria, if a project has an average of 50% AMI, they are eligible for 100% reduction of the fees, but only for those units at 60% or less of AMI. And then if the roundtable group felt there's a couple developers out there that are building units for very affordable, for very low income. And so they felt that if the project had an average of 30%, was geared towards average of 30% AMI, or all the units at 50% or less AMI, then they would be eligible for 100% reduction for all their units. And so again, as I mentioned before, if it's just a few units, it's going to be a few $1,000s, maybe $10,000, $20,000. If you're building a larger unit, sewer impact fees can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. So this can be a huge savings. And it's really one of the only places where the city can financially step in and help because of our resources are so limited. All right, next slide, please. So council, as I mentioned, council adopted that ordinance in February, and then March, the world stopped. So we saw very few permits for a while. They have picked back up. We're actually having quite a large permit year. You've probably seen quite a bit of construction going on around town. So there's still activity, and we're starting to get some interest in this program. Our application is available on our website. We've had quite a few calls about the program, but we have had nobody apply for it at this time. So when the application comes in, it does, as I mentioned, it goes to all of the departments that are involved. So it's going to go to finance and either building for the building permit fund, or public works for the sewer hookup fees. And they will do an analysis of the impact and make a recommendation to City Council. City Council will make the consideration at that time. And then, and hopefully we're in a condition where we can support the subsidy of those funds and do what we can to get more units online. I already mentioned we have not received any applications at this time, but we have staff available to meet with anybody should anybody want to move forward using this program. The city has many resources and an affordable housing division that is managed through the Community Development Department. And so we are always willing to sit down with whoever wants to discuss projects and look at the resources and appropriate locations for this type of development. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Claudia. A few things come to my mind from here is impressive that 10 days for the roundtable discussion and not movement within a government entity. Impressive. And also, did you estimate the number of units that might access this in the next 1 year or 3 years? Just to kind of get an idea of the fiscal implications?
Yeah, looking back at this, had we done it in the last couple of years, it's really not that many. We just don't see that many units. We were guessing maybe in the 20 units range, somewhere in there, 20 to 25 units. And we're not sure what we're going to be seeing coming forward, but that's what it would have been over the last couple of years.
Well, that's good perspective. And I think this is a really good example of how, where policy can play into affording avenues to, helping support affordable housing. And it would be really wonderful if some other communities took this on, don't you think that it would be something that they could use as well?
Definitely. So if we, as I mentioned, if we move forward with the regional road impact fee, we would need Sparks and Washoe County to be involved through the RIF because that is a regional program. When we were adopting this, I did reach out to Sparks and Washoe County at that time. At that moment, it wasn't on their radar to work on it. We did encourage them to bring it forward. I just don't know where those two entities are and if they're considering it now.
And I'm just curious, and we'll leave some time for others to ask questions. Is that something that is something that you follow up with when it's time to do regional planning to reach out to those other cities as well, or city in the county? Our new city manager was the assistant city manager in Sparks. So I think we have an in now over there. So maybe we'll tap into those resources moving forward. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much for that great information.
Sure.
For your work on that, Claudia. Appreciate that. So, right now, so far, we've had Christine kind of give us an overview of what, affordable housing looks like, where we might have some lacking infrastructure there, and Claudia letting us know some avenues of where we can build on that. Now I'd like to introduce you to Eric Novak, and he's going to talk about what the future looks like and where we may have opportunities for growth. Eric is the president of Praxis Consulting Group. He has over 35 years of experience in housing and human services policy and affordable housing finance. Since founding Praxis in 2004, he has assisted nonprofits, for-profits, and government organizations to develop and finance over 75 affordable housing developments, mostly in Nevada, and that totals 7,250 units at a $1.25 billion in financing. Wow. He also provides technical assistance to public housing authorities in the areas of strategic planning, portfolio assessment, mixed finance, and RAD development, Choice Neighborhood Initiative applications and implementation. He's one of the founders and board member of the Nevada Housing Coalition. And thank you so much for being here today, Eric.
Thanks for having me. And I want to say thank you so much to Claudia for shepherding the SB 103 initiative. It actually is huge for our industry, and it's just to give you a sense of the scale. Our impact fees on affordable housing, we usually budget about $16,000 a unit in Reno for affordable housing for multifamily apartment buildings. And so the sewer and permit fees might be 5,000 of that. And so if you imagine 5,000 multiplied by 100 units, that's a lot of money that we're able to save on developing affordable housing. And it has it's one of the many puzzle pieces we use when putting together the financing for projects. So we're really excited about that. And we have 2 applications that are going in the next month to test out the new program. And so we're actually, it's wonderful to be part of a small state where you can have an impact on statewide policy, and then just to see it being taken by one of the local governments and running with it is exciting. I was going to talk, so I'm the chair of the policy committee for Nevada Housing Coalition, and I was asked to speak on some new legislation that we're proposing for the 2021 legislative session, which is an early notification requirement for owners of affordable housing, which is part of a preservation strategy. So in this talk, I was going to talk a little bit about our existing affordable housing portfolio in Nevada, talk a little bit about what goes into creating new affordable housing units, and then talk about what we can do to preserve this valuable stock and about this new legislation. Nevada has about 35,000 units of affordable housing across the state in 450 developments. And this includes tax credit housing, tax exempt finance housing, HUD assisted housing. These are what used to be referred to as Section 8 housing, public housing. In the rural areas, we have USDA rural development projects. And then we have lots of small group homes and special needs properties that have been financed over time with public monies. About 10,000 of those units have rental assistance. And so these are units where households pay 30% of their adjusted gross income towards rent. So if you have no income, you pay no rent. If you, but it's extremely valuable housing, and it allows us to target those households that are at that below 30% of AMI, which is the most vulnerable population in our state. Christine had referred to the GAP report from the National Low Income Housing Coalition, and one of the striking facts that comes out of the report is that Nevada has the least amount of housing serving households below 30% of AMI of any state in the country. So that for every household that's below 30% of AMI, we have 18 units available. And the average across the country is 36 units. And part of that is that Nevada just didn't end up with the amount of federal largesse that other states got in housing. We grew later than other states. And so a lot of those programs, by the time Nevada was growing, were already being wrapped up. We didn't have any new public housing. Probably those programs started wrapping up in the late 70s, early 80s. And so all that housing with rental assistance just it's something that's very precious. We have to preserve it. Praxis, we are development finance consultants, so we work with for-profit, nonprofit developers to apply for and package the financing on affordable housing projects. And it takes a long time to develop one project. So from inception to lease up, the arc of development is like 2.5 to 3 years. And the main financing tools we use are tax credits, are really pass-through programs from the federal government mainly. So the federal low-income housing tax credit, tax-exempt bond financing, grants from HUD. A typical project will have many sources of funding in it. And that's why and each of these programs comes with their own funding requirements, income restrictions, legal documents, reporting requirements. That's why the developers need consultants like us to help them on that, because it's just a lot of lawyers and government and public agencies involved in funding each individual project. It's very expensive to develop new housing. It's costing us in Nevada from $200,000 to $300,000 per unit to develop a new housing. So that's a lot of public subsidy that's required. And that's why preservation is so important. It's much more expensive and complicated to build new units than it is to preserve what we have. So HUD and USDA stopped funding new housing, as I said, with rental assistance many years ago. So this stock is fixed and it has to be reserved. Preserved. There is no replacement for it. Many of these developments are old and suffer from deferred maintenance. So they need new public subsidy just to keep them safe and up to code and to current energy efficiency and accessibility standards. So we do a lot of assessments of public housing portfolios, and you'll see housing that has been fully occupied forever, that the occupancy rates are 99% just consistently with long waiting lists. And this is housing that maybe hasn't had a renovation in 30 years. So it may have original kitchen cabinets, original countertops, vanities, and so it's just tired. It's very important, necessary housing, but it needs an infusion of capital every once in a while to keep it up and running. I think Nevada's done a good job in understanding that preservation is important, so that in our tax credit rules, we have a USDA set aside. It's been there since I moved to Nevada in the early, in 2002, that specifically funds preservation of rural projects. And so there have been dozens of developments funded under that program. The Housing Division uses its taxes and bond financing to fund the renovation of older tax credit projects. So we are doing that now, and it's just, there's a big need out there, and we're trying to address what we can. But there's another problem with, in addition just aging stock, we have units that are just at risk of expiring or of owners opting out of the program altogether. So when we develop these projects, they typically have affordability restrictions that are recorded on the property, and they're 20 years to 30 years old, 30 years of affordability. At the end of that period, an owner is free to opt out of the affordability restrictions, sell the project, or take the project to market rate rents. And keep in mind that much of affordable housing in Nevada is owned by for-profit owners. So they're not obligated to maintain their properties as affordable once the restrictions expire. So based on estimates from the Nevada Housing Division, just within our tax credit portfolio, there are about 10,000 units in developments that are at risk of opting out of the affordability restrictions over the next 5 years. So in 2019 alone, we lost 1,066 affordable units to the private market, which resulted in a net decrease for the state in our affordable housing inventory. In Reno, we had 2 properties, Courtyard Center and City Center in downtown Reno, 500 units of affordable tax credit housing where the owner opted out of those programs. And so we lost those units through a special loophole that's called the qualified contract process. This doesn't mean that all owners will necessarily opt out of the program or even that every development is something worth preserving. But we need to do whatever we can to intervene to preserve well-run developments that are in high demand areas. And so so what are we doing about that? And I think the Nevada, during the last legislative session, in addition to the legislation that allowed, in addition for SB 103, which allowed for this sewer and permit fee reduction, we had some other legislation. One of them was the creation of an advisory committee on housing reporting to the Department of Business and Industry, and they were given 1 bill draft request this legislative session. And so that committee has decided to make early notification of owners, by owners of affordable housing, its priority. So there's a bill draft request, it's AB 372, which is an early notification process for owners opting out of subsidized housing programs. And the way the notification would work is that 12 months prior to opting out of a program, an owner is obligated to notify 4 parties. One, the head of the local government where the project is located, the resident, each resident of the project, the Nevada Housing Division, and then all current owners of low-income housing in the state who might be able to purchase the property and preserve it, who might be good stewards in the future of the property. The idea is to intervene as early as possible to give the state and local governments and potential qualified buyers time to assemble the resources to purchase and rehabilitate the property and preserve its long-term affordability. So we think these increased notice requirements will enhance Nevada's ability to track units that are at risk of losing affordability, so that the Housing Division and others can facilitate their preservation. So we're really excited about that legislation. The bill draft request was just submitted to the Legislative Council Bureau. We'll see what comes out. We gave them a draft bill. It'll be interesting. But again, I've never done this before. It's very fun to have an impact on public policy at the state level. So we're excited. A lot of things can be done that don't require new legislation. And some of the other strategies we're discussing for preservation would be to come up with an early warning system to assess which developments are most at risk of opting out and which properties are most worth preserving based upon their condition and the neighborhoods where they're located. And so this would be an assessment of all affordable properties that are at risk of opting out of the programs, and then to look at, are these, it may be a poorly run property in a distressed neighborhood where we say, you know what, I don't think this is worth spending public money to preserve it. But at least we would then have a way of ranking, prioritizing properties. Some other strategies would be defined to place developments with mission-driven nonprofits and government organizations who will act as good long-term stewards of the property. Since the idea is if you get more of these affordable properties into the hands of nonprofits, that there's a greater likelihood that they will hold on to them and keep them in good condition and reinvest in them over time. We've been advocating for more public funds for preservation. And so we have a set of rules under the tax credit program called the Qualified Allocation Plan. And one of the things we do is just try and make sure that preservation is always a priority. You get more points if you're preserving existing housing, and so that there's some likelihood that those projects get funded. We're talking with the Nevada Housing Division about closing these loopholes like the qualified contract process that make it easier for some owners to opt out of the programs. And one of the other things we're discussing is maybe creating a statewide preservation coalition. At the Nevada Housing Coalition Conference in 2 weeks, we're going to have a panel. It's on Tuesday, the 27th at 1 p.m. that is specifically on preservation. And we've asked coalition leaders from Colorado and Oregon to talk about how their programs work and what we may be able to learn from in building a preservation coalition in Nevada. Anyway, and I'm here for questions, and thank you.
Wow, Eric, that was an amazing amount of information. It's telling when the gap report says Nevada has the least amount of housing in the nation for those 30% AMI or less. Your point is so well taken that preservation is a lot more economic than the new building that you said was 200 to 300,000. You did mention that, I think you said we're at risk of potentially losing 10,000 units. But in addition to that, how many units do we have come on per year, even if we didn't lose any? How many new units?
So I want to say we have probably about 1,600 new units a year, something like that, that are, and most of this, we have a 9% tax credit program that produces about 300-400 units a year. And then we have a tax exempt bond program that might produce, I want to say 3 or 4 prizes, another 600 to 800 units a year. And so in Northern Nevada, what's been very exciting, I would say, is that we've seen a renaissance of new construction bond projects. These are 100% affordable developments. And so in Northern Nevada, you've seen Vintage at the Crossing, which opened up on on Old Virginia Road in DeMonte, right on the freeway, 230 units of new senior housing. Steamboat at the Summit, which is right at Veterans Parkway, which is 200, God, I'm forgetting it now, that I think that's 280 units. Sky Mountain, which is on the old Kmart site in the Northwest, which is another roughly 280 units. And so we've had some great progress in the last few years in developing new affordable housing in Reno. And I think that similarly in Las Vegas, we've also seen that. There's been much more production happening since like 2015 on. And there's some reasons for that, but that's so that's been very exciting to see. We want to see more of it. It's just been very hard to oh, I'm sorry. And Elizabeth, Betsy Fidali just reported last 5 years, our average was 900 units a year. Thank you, Betsy.
Yep.
She's our state economist, so she would know.
Does a phenomenal job. Thank you for that, Betsy. And you know, I think I don't want to get too in the woods and take this too long, but we know there's long waiting lists for these units as well. So even if we talk about the number of units available, it would be really telling for me to see how many folks are on waiting lists to access affordable housing.
And waiting lists aren't even a good measure in public housing. The waiting lists are just shut off at a certain because they're not meaningful. If you're on a waiting list for 5+ years, that's not a meaningful index. And so, but I can, the state puts out, Betsy Fidali's on the line, and they put out a report every year on vacancy rates in our affordable housing stock. It's very, very low. It's typically, under 5% vacancy rate for most of our tax credit housing across the state. And so that suggests there's enormous demand for that affordable housing. Anything with rental assistance, there's there are long waiting lists for. It's very hard to get into new units of housing with rental assistance. So, and particularly in the north, we've just had, because of the boom in the rental housing market in northern Nevada, our affordable stock has, we'll open a development and it will fill immediately. There is no issue with demand.
Right. Well, I think if nothing else, we can tell that affordable housing development and funding is a complicated business. And I personally am very grateful for your team on the coalition. And also, I think it's a good reminder to know that the bill that you're introducing, it's an informational, it's to be notified when certain things happen. It's not fiscal note, it's not going to cost anybody anything. It's more about
Exactly.
being notified that units are dropping off.
Right, and it came up because when we lost City Center and Courtyard Center, the mayor had said, I wish we had been given more time. Like, we could have assembled the financing to preserve these if we had known, if we'd had more time. And I think that that's the sense of, if we can get local governments and the housing division, as well as it's just a courtesy to residents. I mean, if residents are going to be losing their affordable, there's some protections under the tax credit program that even when a project opts out of the tax credit program, the owners have to keep the units affordable for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is some protection for residents, but it's still, it's a courtesy to everyone that they're notified of what's going on and have the opportunity to respond.
Absolutely. Well, we keep our fingers crossed on the passing of that bill. And thank you again, Eric, for your information and your participation. That kind of leads us into the here and now. We know that the eviction stays that were set by the governor have been lifted, and there's all kinds of other timeframes that go into that, where in addition to just affordable housing, we have just a general housing crisis happening right now due to the financial impacts of COVID. I'm going to have Shannon Chambers, our state of Nevada Labor Commissioner, come on and talk to us a little bit about some programs that are being developed in Nevada to work us through the eviction processes that are happening, but also she's going to have some interesting information about the state of evictions in Nevada in general, even without a crisis. I wish there were better numbers to report and there were happier, data to assign to Nevada. But now I'm going to bring on Shannon, who is the Nevada Labor Commissioner since 2014. Prior to that, she worked for the California Attorney General's Office and the Nevada Legislative Council Bureau. She was appointed as the president of Home Means Nevada, the Home Means Nevada program in 2017. She is a fourth-generation Nevadan and a graduate of Pepperdine Law and the University of Nevada, Reno. So welcome, Shannon, and we look forward to your information.
So thank you, Linda, very much, and thank you to all the presenters before me and to everybody on this call today. And I know these things tend to run long, so I'll try and keep it as concise and informative as possible. So I've been the Nevada Labor Commissioner since 2014, and that's my official day job. And so in state government, you kind of get voluntold to take over different assignments. So I was voluntold to take over Home Means Nevada in 2017, and just for perspective, so going back to the mid-2000s when Nevada went through its initial kind of real estate crisis, and Nevada wasn't unique, a lot of other states went through that, but Nevada set up what they called the foreclosure mediation program, which kind of worked its way through 2006 all the way up through 2017. There was discussion actually in 2017 of actually getting rid of that program, because the view was that the real estate market had come back, and what really was the program doing at that point? Putting all those decisions aside, there was a decision made to kind of segment the program and move certain functions to Home Means Nevada, move certain functions to the district courts. And so we took over those roles in 2017. one of the main tasks that Home Means Nevada was charged with doing was setting up what they call a portal for foreclosure mediation. Now, again, state government, oftentimes you get tasked with doing things without any money. So we had to get that kind of up and running very quick and get funding and different things like that, get staffing. And, you know, we set up a portal and, you know, is it the best portal in the world? No, of course it's not. It's not $1 million portal. We didn't have that kind of funding. So I hear that criticism all the time, and that's fine. And we're working on improving that, as we've been doing since we implemented that in 2018. But flash forward to 2020, when the events of COVID-19 started to hit, and I was approached by legislators, I was approached by attorneys who had handled foreclosures, I was approached by housing advocates, I was approached by legal aid of, you know, maybe Home Means Nevada should set something up for homeowners in Nevada, and this is on the homeowner side, to provide them with information about what their options were, you know, how they could work with their banks, how they could work with housing assistance agencies, different things like that. So we worked very quickly to set up what we call the Homeowner Connect. It is a neutral platform where a homeowner can come in, document, you know, their questions, their concerns, that then can be given to a servicer, bank, etc. There's kind of two options for the servicers or banks. They can be a registered participant of Homeowner Connect, or they can just get the information from us. So we're not trying to substitute the judgment of the banks or substitute their websites or substitute essentially what their legal requirements are. We're trying to be a neutral platform for homeowners in Nevada, because unfortunately, in my experience as the president of Home Means Nevada, and even taking over the foreclosure mediation program in 2017, there were still cases going all the way back to 2007, 2008, 2010, because things were so mismanaged on all sides from the start that it resulted in litigation, it resulted in different things. So the goal of Homeowner Connect was, again, to provide a neutral platform where Nevada homeowners, consumers could come in, get directed to a housing and urban development counselor, get their questions answered. That information, again, would then be given to the banks, or they'd be redirected to their banks or servicer. And if the servicer or bank was an actual registered participant in Homeowner Connect, they could access that directly. So I know Linda is going to provide some more information on that after this meeting. The whole goal was to be over-prepared, and I'm going to use that phrase again and again and again. And I hope in 2021 that I can just say, well, we were prepared and we didn't need this, and we can convert it into a housing information portal or whatever we need to do. But in talking with many of the stakeholders that went through what we went through in 2006 up and through, you know, the late 2000s, the goal was to be over prepared. So again, that's what we're trying to do, and trying to provide a neutral platform for Nevada homeowners. Again, want to emphasize, we're not going to be the bank, we're not going to be the servicer, but we do know that there are certain individuals out there that feel more comfortable interacting, whether it's the first or second stage, with some type of a neutral agency or nonprofit. So that is the goal. That went live. It's been live since May. So it went live in September, and obviously there's the CARES Act that has a certain prohibition right now on foreclosures, mainly involving the federally government-backed loans. I will tell you, I get the monthly updates about notice of defaults, and notice of defaults, especially in Clark County, are starting to happen. Now, that may not involve a government loan, that may involve something else, but in September, there were 37, actually August, there were 37, September, there were 24. So there's some types of notice of defaults that are happening. I'm not going to get into the legal aspects of that, but that was the goal of Homeowner Connect, and it's live and it's functioning. And since we launched it in September, we have had quite a bit of activity. And again, those those inquiries get directed to their bank or their servicer, or again, if the servicer is signed up to engage in that platform, they can engage the homeowner directly about that. The main thrust of those questions is the confusion about forbearance. And I have a copy of a report that was sent to me September 30th, 2020, about just the confusion over forbearances alone and what that means and what it doesn't mean. So again, that was the goal of Homeowner Connect, and it's going to be there, and it may have a different vision in 2021 if we do get to the state where there started to be notice of defaults on a much more active level, once some of the moratoriums on the state or federal level start to get lifted. Again, not saying or knowing what the federal government's going to do within the next month or two, and obviously we have an election in there, but we wanted, again, to my point, to be over prepared, and I'm pretty confident that we have done that. So that's on the homeowner side. On the rental side, so when you have an organization like Home Means Nevada that's a nonprofit, you can act more quickly than state government, and I'm just going to say that in the most honest sentence. So when the second special session happened in August in the Nevada legislature, they came up with the rental eviction mediation program, and that came out in mid-August. And then the question was, well, how do we implement that, knowing that the moratorium on rental evictions was going to lift on October 15th, and then throwing in the kind of, I guess, whatever you want to call it, I'm not even going to use a term, of what the federal government did in terms of the Centers for Disease Control moratorium on evictions and how that plays into place. Anyway, Home Means Nevada was ordered to be the administrator of the rental eviction mediation program. So we literally worked at light speed with all the different stakeholders to set up the Renter Connect. So Renter Connect is now live. It will basically kind of work as a spoke in the wheel, so to speak, to get the tenant, the mediators, and the courts working together to arrange for mediation on potential eviction situations. Again, I'm not going to get into all the legal arguments about what or what doesn't apply in terms of the Centers for Disease Control moratorium and different things like that, but it went live this morning, 6 a.m. I know Linda will share that information as well. It's very user-friendly, has different graphics, different logins for all the different parties. We will also capture tenant information, people who may not be evicted yet, but people who need help. And in those types of situations, we will attempt to guide them to entities like Opportunity Alliance or to rental assistance programs. But the goal of both Homeowner Connect and Renter Connect is, excuse the term, but to be the spoke in the wheel and to guide those people to where they may or may not be helped. We certainly know that there's going to be situations where people just don't qualify or they just cannot be helped by some of these programs. But again, want to be a neutral platform on all sides to provide information, to guide people to potential resources, whether that's financial or legal, and then see how all of this goes forward. The other, interesting side to all of this, and it's a fiscal side to this, is anything that's associated with CARES Act money, as of now, has to be spent by December 31st, 2020. So how do you develop programs and get assistance to people literally in probably 2.5 months, if that's really going to stay of what we have left? So just trying to work with all the different entities, all the different parties involved, and really thank Linda and her group for, working with us just to get the word out. Again, we're not the final decision maker on any of these issues, but just trying to point people in the right direction and get them hooked up with somebody that can potentially help them. And in the interest of time, like I said, we have this set up probably within 2 weeks is a best guess, and you'll get the link to it. You can log on to it, see what it does and what it doesn't do. And we're happy to, have that feedback and work forward and improve it. But we literally worked so fast to get this up and running, knowing that If those funds run out December 31st, 2020, this is the best shot we've got, and we're going to give it 100%. So with that, I'll stop. And I know we're over time here, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Shannon. And really, we are scheduled to go to 1:30. So I just always, pad in a little extra time for questions and answers. And Eric had a good question. I know Venetia is on here from Legal Aid, and I don't mean to call anybody out, but do we even have an idea if the deadlines for expenditure of CARES Act money may be extended past?
So I'll jump in here, I guess, real quick. So CARES Act spending money is supposed to be used by December 30th of this year. So the issue that we've been talking about here is, especially for like the eviction moratorium, the bulk of that money would be needed after December 30th to help people. We are kind of taking a wait and see look because the answer to that question in the long term might turn on the election.
Right. So what do we got? 18 more days for the election. This will be a long 18 days. And I know, Venetia, again, not to put you on the spot, you're just such a good information source. I know there's still, maybe even at the state Supreme Court level, deciding, the eviction stays being lifted. How do the CDC overlays fit into there? Any word on that?
So I think it's going to come down to court arguments. I think we hold a position that the CDC moratorium covers the same thing that our eviction moratorium covers as far as for no cause evictions or for non-payment of rent evictions. What we're seeing is some landlords going to court with potentially constitutional arguments. So we're wondering if it's going to go, if it's going to end up having to be decided in court. So if you would like, I can maybe talk with Jim Birchtold, and at the next meeting, if you would like to bring him back, he would have much more updated and specific information on that.
Thank you. And I think we probably will do that, Venetia. I'm curious with the lifting of the governor's stay of evictions, how quickly can that actually get through the courts? I guess from my perspective of financial stability, financial capabilities, and no, I'm asking you to look in a crystal ball. How many people is it likely we're going to have, on the sidewalk from evictions?
Well, depending on what month we're looking at, I know the Gwynn Center said anywhere, over 100,000 to over 200,000. A lot of that is tied up with, people getting their job back, and whether it's coming from like an apartment, a weekly, personal landlord with housing, all across the board, how they're working with people. So it's a really broad number. I wish I had an answer for you today. I don't, but I can definitely follow up with Jim and maybe email you to see if he's got something more. I can send that to you today.
I guess, Venetia, I was just trying to get the number highlighted. So thank you, trying to just say 200,000 people on the street, potentially. I'm not saying that's happening. It's just if everyone could just have an understanding of the numbers, kind of like what Eric gave us on how complicated, or, it's a lot easier to preserve affordable housing than it is to build new. I think some of this information and the data points are so important to hear. Let's see.
So Linda, this is Shannon again. So there was a mediation training yesterday, and that similar question came up, and Jim was there, Venetia, and we hate to keep using this term unknown. So we're obviously going to monitor. I mean, the moratorium was lifted, so we're going to monitor what comes in to Renter Connect. Obviously over the next week or so. Again, I don't want to use that term, but to Venetia's point with the court situation now, and it really is an unknown. And you heard somebody yesterday say crystal ball, magic 8-ball, and as government officials, and I'm one, I never like to use those type of terms, but it really is almost those three. And I saw Eric's question about the CARES Act getting extended. I mean, in 18 or 20 days, we might know that question, Eric. there's so much up in the air right now. And if I was a juggler, I might be a millionaire by now over this past year. But it really, like I said, we're going to monitor things as they come into Renter Connect and as the cases get filed with the courts. But it really is an unknown in my view at this point.
And you know, there's some good questions. Thank you, Shannon. And there's some good questions in the chat. They also, someone just said, what's the likely, no, they're saying part of the way to keep people in their homes, obviously, is rental assistance. Opportunity Alliance just was awarded a grant to help Clark County stay in their housed circumstances. But I thought there was a really great question on here. It says, is there any government initiative that requests large companies such as Amazon, Tesla, Apple to contribute towards low-income housing, considering the number of employees they have? Eric, I don't know if that's something for you. I mean, I know it's not local.
No, I mean, that's a great question. And that's generally referred to as linkage fees, so that as it's in the broad category of inclusionary zoning. So it's zoning initiatives that would allow for new development to pay for some of the impact on our housing stock. And so we are shopping around a number of bill draft requests to the legislature. One of them would be to expand the enabling legislation for zoning, which is NRS 278-250, to include linkage or in lieu fees, which would be a way of asking for businesses moving to a community to contribute towards affordable housing. And Washoe County, as you may know, has a new affordable housing trust fund. It has no money in it, but a fund was created through the county commission, and this might be a way of funding that housing trust fund that would then be another source of funding for affordable housing. And so a lot of things in Nevada, you require state legislation to enable local governments to be able to do them. And so this is one of the bills we're talking about would expand the powers of local government to be able to do that.
Great. And also, there was a note that many properties in Reno are being demolished and very few are being preserved and renovated. Why are more of these properties not being saved to create affordable housing? Do you think this will change to address the need?
You know, we've spent years fighting to improve the conditions in our motel housing stock in Reno. We have had at some point over 3,000 units of weekly motels. It's hard to argue for the preservation of the housing because it has always been our de facto affordable housing. Really poor condition, no regulation, limited regulation, so on. And so now that we are losing it to redevelopment, and some of the redevelopment, it's great to finally see parts of the downtown being redeveloped and fixed up. But yes, it's having a big impact on housing, and I don't know what that is, and I don't know if Claudia, if you want to take that one at all.
It really comes down to private property rights. I mean, people buy property, make money. They don't buy property to give it away or to build affordable housing. Typically, there's a few people out there, but there's a few large developers downtown. There's a lot of student housing needs also, and students pay a lot more, and people are in it for money. And it's their right as property owners. We can't come in and prohibit them from demolishing an old building.
Right. Thank you. Just a real quick note, Nevada Hand has vacancies available as well as supportive services for anyone looking for an immediate solution. So and it was to everyone, but I want to make sure that's highlighted. And we are getting towards the end of our time. So I want to make sure that everyone, if you have another question you would like answered, please go ahead and post it in the chat. If you'd like to have a say, you can let us know and we can give you some speaking time as well. And before we just finish up with that, I just want to say, I think this has been an amazing panel. I appreciate the time that you've spent with us today and helping us understand what the state of affordable housing looks like. I thought it was a very poignant conversation overlaid with Shannon Chambers' information on what they're trying to do to help folks maneuver through the crisis created out of the COVID health crisis. I think in a way it's almost encouraging to see the team of folks we have on this. So a big thank you to everyone on the Nevada Housing Coalition, and Claudia, you at the city, and Shannon, you at the state level, everyone. I mean, legal aid, Venetia, just offering up to provide us information wherever we need it. I'm always encouraged at forums like this at what the powers that be in Nevada really are working towards. So I just want to offer a really big thank you for that. And Christine, I want to give you a few more minutes just to mention your summit again and how people can participate, and if you want to invite them to your policy arm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had a few of you reach out. Thanks. Send me an email, christine.hess. I'll put it in the chat. But if you're interested in being a part of the coalition, Eric is our policy chair and on my board, and he's awesome. He's my knowledge for sure and expertise. I know just enough to be dangerous, but the summit has been incredible. Actually, I don't know your first name, but we do have a panel called Housers and Non-Housers Unite. And I actually have one of the, it's essentially going to talk about the housing ecosystem, right? And how there's so much, the intersections are so strong with education, business, health. I mean, we're seeing that now in the pandemic more than ever. And one of the speakers is actually from the National Education Association. He's a civil rights director, really looking forward to that. Harry Lawson. Opportunity Starts at Home, National Low Income Housing Coalition. Mike Kaprowski's the national director for that. But to the question around the employer-sponsored component, we have Diane Lynn from Proud Ground, which is a community land trust in Oregon, and they participate in a workforce housing pilot program. And they have a really interesting model. They actually have these housing integrators in Oregon that kind of take our adjacent sectors and really strategically work on them relative to housing. So whether it's health or education, and in this case, workforce was the program that Diane participated in. So that, when we talk about employers engaging in housing, affordable housing, that could be of interest. Eric's leading the panel on preservation. Betsy's on there, who knows so much. Thank you, Betsy, for being a part of that as well. Also, the rental market revamp, I think, could be an interesting conversation for this group. Thanks, Shannon, for all the work you've done. That's huge. But just as we think about where we are, this panel is not meant to go into the weeds on evictions and not evictions and what do we do here. It's really meant to move us forward, and to do so with taking a look at what other innovative tools and solutions are out there. I would say it's not necessarily traditional affordable housing, but it should pique our curiosity. We have PadSplit coming, which is a technology and app for co-living, and it's in Georgia, Atlanta, and Texas right now, and really helping with some of the affordable housing challenges. Don't know about you all, but I see it here daily. I've seen it personally with a friend here in Reno. When they can't find a place, they go to Craigslist and Facebook, and that's not the most efficient way to find housing. But until Eric gets our 70,000 units built, if you can get that done, Eric, until then, we have to also have some other solutions on this spectrum again of affordable housing. So, just some different options. Zillow is doing some cool things. We have a landlord engagement tool. The Nevada State Apartment Association will be on it. But check out the program. And by the way, I want to tell everyone there's also scholarships available. We have, if you're not a Housing Coalition member, we want you all to be members. But that said, we also want you all to attend. It's meant for everyone who wants to be there and to take part. So just, again, I'll put my email in the chat. Hit me up for a scholarship. And if you want to come, and it's a small registration fee of $45. But we want you there if you want to be there. Oh, and gosh, shame on me. we're so excited too. Governor Sisolak, this is all brand new. Just this week has announced that he'll be providing opening remarks, and the state leadership, the treasurer, the AG, and the governor have really done some fantastic things. I mean, before COVID and now through COVID, I think really Nevada has had, you know, we're not perfect, but I can tell you when I listen around the country, we've done some amazing things. So very excited to welcome Governor Sisolak. By no means should he not be first. And Senator Cortez Masto will be providing a custom greeting, which is virtual, so it'll be like she's in person. She realized it was backed up to the election, so she decided she might have something come up last minute, which is highly likely. So anyway, we are really looking forward to it. Thanks, Linda, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Christine. What an amazing slate that you have for that summit. So anyone who is halfway interested, please take a look and join if you can. It's going to be so worthwhile. So another big shout out to the panelists and to you folks for sticking with us and participating and listening to this information. Thank you. Thank you for supporting Opportunity Alliance Nevada and the things we do, and which helps us support our community, our statewide community. With that, I will say have a wonderful afternoon to everyone, and we will see you again soon. Thank you.